Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the university and to this event. At the outset, I'd like to pay our respects to the Bidjigal people, the traditional owners of this land, and to their elders and ancestors. I'd also like to acknowledge a number of really special guests. First and foremost, the subject of this night's interrogation, Mr. Frank Lowy. I think the original plan was to do this in someone's home, but I don't think anyone had a home big enough to accommodate the sort of crowd that Frank is able to draw. But it's delightful to have you back as a friend of the university, as a holder of an honorary doctorate, and as a major, probably in terms of family, the major donor to this institution, and the father and husband of a number of degree holders. So wonderful to have someone with such strong linkages back here and to talk to us very openly. I'd like to welcome our Chancellor, who is playing the role of Tony Jones, a man who can play many roles. I'd like to recognise Michael Chisholm from UBS, who are sponsors of this series, and Louise Walsh, the Chief Executive of Philanthropy Australia, who are putting this on.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me start. I just wanted to give you a vignette about Frank Lowy before I introduce and talk to the great man. I told him I was very nervous about this because I'm not Tony Jones, and he didn't know, but the only reason I was chosen for this, as most of you know from my previous attempts, is I'm the only person that still has a clipboard, and of course I got the job just because of that. So Frank's advice, and that's why you may have seen us walking backwards and forwards, is just assume we're sitting in your living room and having a chat. So Frank, welcome to the Chancellor's living room. Most of these people are our friends. I hope you didn't mind me inviting 300 of my mates along.
No problem, David.
Frank, I want to cover a number of issues, a number of ideas within the great person, in my opinion, that you are. And when I have finished, there'll be a bit of time for people to tell me the questions that I forgot to ask. I want to go back a bit. You were born many years ago in Filikova in Czechoslovakia. To say that you came from humble origins is an underestimate. I wanted to ask you, so many years later, do you still think back to that time? And more importantly, how does it affect your thinking of this time?
Well, I do think about those days quite a bit. Of course, this is where my origin is. And this is my family was there, mother, father, and 3 of my siblings. And whilst it was difficult, well, start with the anti-Semitism, chasing us non-Jewish boys when we went to school and when we came home, and all the trauma that goes with it. Nevertheless, it was that's where I was born, and I think a lot about that little place, so to speak, and I've been there several times. I took, first time in 1968, I think, Shirley and I went there, still under communism. Don't think I need to tell you what the visit was like, but it was very sobering. And then later on, a few years later, I took David and Margot, Peter and Janine, Stephen and Judy on a trip, what they call these days a roots trip, which was also very, very fruitful to all of us, I think. We went to the little house where we lived, and compare it to where we are today, I think you wouldn't be able to compare it. So it was very educational, and you always have to remember where you come from. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going.
When you read the book, which I'm not here to be Jill Margot's pimp or whatever, but when you read the book on your life, it's very clear that your mother was very important to you and to your life generally. You want to tell us a bit about your mother?
Well, my mother is very important, was very important, and will be until I die. I think of her very often. And in fact, I used to live with her in New South Head Road in Ashcottas Bay. So living in that part of Sydney, I traveled there daily, backwards and forwards. And after she passed away, of course, when I drove, I used to look up there, what's going on. When she was alive, of course, I looked up, and when she passed away, for many, many years, and I still do that. Not every day, but very, very often. In fact, where I used to live with my mother and my brother John, there was a one-bedroom apartment, 3 adults. Don't need to tell you the details, but it was available for renting some 4 or 5 years ago. So having regard to those days and back to the place where I was born and the past, the family visited the place. And it consisted of a bedroom with, of course, 2 beds where my brother and I slept. There was 1 bathroom and a kitchen and a little lounge room adjacent to it. And 3 of us lived there. I must tell you, lived there happily. You know, I didn't miss anything. But when you don't quite have it and you don't, of course, that was the time when we came to Australia, the first couple of years, not even less than that. We lived there, and the great joy of reuniting with the family, who cared about the little place? All was important that we are together again, although not 100%, but close. Of course, my father, there's a famous story about him, which we won't go into it. We don't want to make you very unhappy and sad. Other than that, we were together, 4 of us, and my mother, so it was a very happy time. So actually, who cared whether it was small? And particularly the grandchildren, I couldn't believe it, you know? A tiny little bathroom. My mother slept on the couch, and there was nothing was missing for us at the time.
Does it affect your thinking? Are you very careful with money, even though now you've got a lot of money?
Well, careful is the wrong word, but I want to be responsible. We all want to be responsible of using that money properly, because it's corrupting if you don't. So you need to value the money that you have, the money that you spend, the money that you deal for other people. You know, I'm, of course, the chairman of a public company, and those responsibilities are very great. And I mean, I can speak reasonably freely about that. When you lose money of your own, of course, provided you have a lot left, you know, you don't worry about it. But of course, losing other people's money is a terrible thing, you know, to the people that you lose it, to you, in your pride in what you do, and sometimes it does happen, but you get very unhappy about it. So I'm very careful of how money is spent, not in a stingy way, but in a proper way.
Tell me, I mean, when you look at your family, Shirley went to this university, the 3 boys went to this university, their spouses went to this university. They've all got degrees. You've got one, but you didn't get an education in the traditional sense. And no one would say that you weren't successful. Yet, and you back education, you talk about education. Why do you believe in education when basically you did so well without it?
Probably because the lack of it for me. But I mean, education is the basis of life, in a way. But education is not only that you get in school or at university. Education is that you get by living. And I missed the education I didn't have. I made it up in very many other ways. And I think I tried to hide it quite successfully. But I'm proud that in spite of, and I'm being told that how wonderful it is, although I don't quite see it that way, but I'm very pleased that I have been able to educate myself in matters of life, more than anything else.
Frank, more than 50 years ago you chose to come to Australia. I'd be interested, firstly, why, and secondly, today, if you were a person at large, as they say, would you choose Australia?
Well, what a question that is, really.
I'm here to be
it's
a questioner.
It's an easy question, very easy question. I could very simply say yes.
I'd prefer you didn't. Just keep going.
And not much more. But why I came here is again, it's kind of an accident of life. After the war in Czechoslovakia, it was very unpleasant to be. Even though the war was over, anti-Semitism was still there. And we were really displaced person in our own places because the people didn't want us there. There was not much sympathy for what happened at the time, and many people were saying or thinking, well, I wish Hitler would have done a better job. You know, I mean, it was part of our life. So I was a boy of 14, close to 15, and I didn't feel like going back to school. Of course, my father wasn't there to tell me, and my mother she didn't tell me. Actually, I still don't know why I didn't go back to school and completed some education there. But I mean, to think now of those days in 1945 with today's surroundings, you just can't quite compare it. But I went to a Zionist group to what is called the Hakshara, was a place for young boys and girls to be. And then there was an opportunity for my group of maybe 15 or 20 boys and girls to go to Palestine. So I went to my mother and I asked her blessing, and she agreed. I still don't know why she agreed and how she agreed. But I think she had a bigger vision than I was thinking at the time, or think about it now. So I went with a group. First we went to Prague. From Prague we went to Paris. And of course Paris, even then, was, for a little boy from Philac, to go be in Paris, it was some excitement. And then, well, I won't go into the trip, otherwise it will take all the time. So the question was that how did I come to Australia? So I went there. I went on the trip to an illegal immigrant to Palestine. I was actually what you call today a boat people. At the time, it was thought was my mother and brothers will also come to Palestine. But through circumstances unrelated to what I'm talking about, they finished up in Australia. And because my sister, it's another story, but anyway, my sister married a guy, a lawyer from another close by town, who had relatives in Australia, sent him the permit, and they went to Australia. They sent the permit to my mother, and you know, that kind of thing. So I was in Palestine, Israel at the time, after release from the army, and I was very lonely. Although I had a brother with me who also did something similar. And the yearning for a family to get together after the tragedies of the war and loss of my father was great, even though I was very happy there. I was very, very, very happy. I think I was reborn in the then Israel. Freedom and having your own country, so to speak. Before you were you weren't a foreigner because you were there, but you were still a foreigner, if you know what I mean. So I had a very good time there. Nevertheless, the family yearning to be together was greater than anything else. Because you mentioned my mother, she was a very strong influence on me. Other than what I'm just going to say, but during the disastrous time of 1944, when my father was taken away, my brother was in hiding, my sister was in hiding somewhere else. I was 14. My mother and I were left kind of alone to fend for ourselves. And wherever we were, she was my home. And it was a very difficult time for us to be in Budapest in 1944. Probably some of you have known the stories. But nevertheless, we relied on each other. And we have grown together so closely as a result of that approximately 1 year, and we survived together, and then we got reunited with the remainder of our family. She was a strong woman. She was very pious. Of course, during those difficult times, of course, you couldn't get kosher food, so she ate whatever it was. She tried not to eat meat. And of course, one little story about her, we were hiding in a place for a high official of the railway system in Hungary. And she was the housekeeper, and I was her illegitimate son. So that was the guise that we were living under. And we were there for quite a few months, a few weeks, for a few months. And came Friday night, my mother still lit 2 candles. And the interesting story of that is that a few days later, I mean, candles were very scarce, you know, during the war, and they were looking for candles. What happened to those candles? But of course, we couldn't tell them, otherwise it would have been. And what I'm just telling you is that she was so strongly pious and believed in God. And of course, she was very, very sad lady, because 2 or 3 years beforehand, she had 6 brothers and sisters in Slovakia, with each family 2 or 3 children, disappeared. I mean, they were deported, and the rest is history. So she was very sad. And afterwards, when my father was snatched away on that fateful day of 20th of March 1944, never to be heard again, was another major blow to her. She was only 44 at the time. And so she had a very, very difficult life as a result of those sadness. And in fact, she died here in Sydney when she was maybe 60 or 61. And I believe she died of broken heart. I'm sorry to make you sad, but that's, you asked me about my life. I mean, that kind of gives you a little picture of what is life all about for me.
Frank, we talked a little bit about the coming to Australia.
Yes.
I thought the other night at an incredible birthday party for the Lowy Institute, Rupert Murdoch made a terrific address in which he talked about Australia having its own culture, a culture of openness and accepting of others. My question to you is, you came to Australia, you came with nothing. Rupert talked about you coming, used you as an example. Was he right that Australia was open to you? Is he right that Australia is still open to you?
Well, I mean, my experience was only positive, really. I mean, when I came here, of course, I was surrounded by my family. And afterwards, about a week or so later, I got a job in a process factory. And there were 3 types of people there. I mean, there were workers coming at 7 o'clock in the morning with a sandwich and a cup of tea at 8 or 9 o'clock. And we were sitting around in the room. There were 3 kinds of people there. One who welcomed you. Others who didn't bother about you. Actually, two types of people, really. And you just carried on. Nobody had any, as far as my experience is concerned, there was no animosity towards me whatsoever. And that kind of attitude right through my existence in Australia, when I moved on and into another job, and then, of course, in a business of my own and my partnership and so on, I have never experienced any disadvantage of being either a foreigner or Jewish in all my time in Australia. And Australia should and is proud of that. I think there's not many countries that can say it, and I don't think it's only my experience. I think it's most people's experience that Australia is open, it's welcoming, or indifferent, not hostile, which I think this is the major thing about Australia. Of course, today we're a multicultural society, the most multicultural that there is in the world, I think, and yet we live peacefully together. If occasionally, like a few years ago, there was some demonstration, Australia took the right course, the right thinking, the right way to deal with them. And they just disappeared. Of course, this is a utopia to think that it's going to be like that forever. From time to time, there may be some disturbance or some disregard for each other's rights, but on the whole, I think Australia, with this attitude towards multiculturalism, towards respecting other peoples, is ingrained in Australian society. And I think it's enriched now because of the multiculturalism, because it practiced what it thought and what it wanted to be.
Frank, I can't resist asking the question, because a little earlier you said you were a boat person.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, at a wonderful opening here of a research centre into refugees, which the Kaldor family have donated to, it was quoted from your Multicultural Council lecture of 2012 that you said, to imagine a better life for you and your family and to make the leap of faith required to leave behind all that is familiar calls for a special kind of courage. If we look at new arrivals in Australia from this perspective, our capacity would be greater to welcome them warmly and to help them make a new home here. What do you feel about the way we're looking at boat people, the way we're looking at policies in relation to boat people?
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. There are millions of refugees, many, many millions of refugees, and not enough places to take them. What we are going through at the moment with that issue, many other countries go through the same thing. So the basic issues are that the government is responsible for its borders. There's no other way to, it's black and white. But at the same time, it needs to deal with these issues in a humane way. Now, the contradiction of these two things, you need to have the wisdom of Solomon, how to deal with that. There are not many Solomons around, in the last couple of thousand years, So it's a very difficult, and various governments try to deal with it differently, but none of them have fully succeeded. The big problem is, of course, the humaneness of it. I mentioned I was a boat people. I know what it is to come on a small little boat that is built maybe for 60 or 70 people. 500-600 people are crammed on it. You are on there for a week to 10 days or 2 weeks, all depends how far you come from. And then when you get there, they don't let you in. I had that experience. Of course, it was a long time ago. It was a different world for different reasons. They don't let you in. How do these people feel? Now then put the other side of it, put the government who is in charge of its borders. Well, how do you find, as I said before, there are not many Solomons in the last 2,000 years. We do our best, I think. Various governments are trying to do their best, but probably, the best is not good enough for the problem. But there are many things in life that there are no solutions or no good solutions. There are solutions, but not good solutions. This one, I think we just need to struggle through and get the best that we can in the circumstances.
Let me change the subject slightly. There was quite a bit already spoken by our Vice-Chancellor and also by Michael about philanthropy. I think that you are one of Australia's largest private philanthropists. I'm pretty sure of that. Why do you do it? Why do you give money away?
Well, I said in the beginning, money is a commodity. So you give it away. But this philanthropy come to me with my mother's milk. In a very simple terminology. It's not a beautiful description, but the facts are, this is the fact. Just to elaborate a little bit on it, when I was a little boy and living in the place that you just mentioned, we had, my father was a commercial traveler, my mother was running a grocery store, and between these two incomes there really wasn't that much to spare. In fact, so much that my father couldn't pay the mortgage. And of course, what happens when you don't pay the mortgage? They take the house away. So my mother summoned her family, and they came to us. They came and rescued the family and put the money up for what my father couldn't do. Then, of course, I can have many stories like that, but to give you a little bit of a picture of that, when during those terrible days in 1944, we were in a ghetto. My brother risked his life to bring us some food. And I sneaked out at night and took it off him and took it back to my place, where there were probably 2 or 3 bedroom flat, maybe 30 or 40 people. So I come with the luggage, we were all very hungry. I gave it to my mother, and what did she do? She opened the bag, the basket, and shared it with everybody, against my protestations. Because I said, Mother, what's going to happen tomorrow, the next day? She just didn't answer, she just shared it with everybody. So, you know, that happened, 80 years ago, nearly 75 years ago. It's still ingrained in my mind. And these are the things that I've learned when I was a little boy. I have a little cliche about it. When you have little, give a little. When you have a lot, give a lot.
Well, on that, let me just take you, I mean, you're a very wealthy man now. I mean, I would be a little bit diffident to ask how much you give, but if you want to give us guidance, that's fine. But more importantly, you know, having answered maybe that or not, how do we get others who are as wealthy as you to give large amounts?
Well, the best way to give, the best reward for giving in a way, it's when it's anonymous. And we, the family, do a lot of that. And when I say that I'm generous, it's not I, but it's the whole family. I mean, Shirley has got her own foundation, and through the Jewish Care, she supports people that are in need of many kind of needs that no institution or no government can help for. I don't think I need to go into details. People who are involved in philanthropy know that. Then, of course, David, before I say that, there are 2 kinds of philanthropy. One is communal service, and one is when you give cash. The easiest way to do philanthropy is sign a check. It's the easiest way, just sign it. If you have it, and you have some left, well, it's no problem, it's there. But of course, when we take on quite a number of philanthropic activities as part of communal service. So we get involved. And not all is charity. There are all in communal service. I mean, there is many other reasons. Of course, there is medical research, there's education, like you are doing with education. How does one value what you have put in to revolutionize education? There's no money that can pay. So that is the greatest philanthropy that you can do when you get personally involved and do something about a cause that you believe in. And you have done that. And I know that you're also making serious philanthropic contributions. And we do it as a family. I mean, David himself has got a museum in Temora, which promulgates the history of our Second World War, First and Second World War, RAAF. You know, I mean, people sit here today and enjoy this beautiful place, Sydney or wherever. Does anybody think that in the middle of the Second World War, there were I don't know how many young Australians that risked their lives, gave their life, and do remember it? Well, that activity of David's makes sure of that. So that's an example of communal service and financial support. Of course, as it happens, Peter lives in the United States, and he does exactly the same. He gives philanthropy on his own and involved in a number of communal, both Jewish and non-Jewish organizations, and he does what kind of we do here. And of course, the Lowy Institute is a big activity for me, and of course I enjoy it, so I get the reward. And of course, it does a good job for, it's a place where it's an investment in ideas. So as I said before, the philanthropy is really, we really combined, you know, if you combine it, but I mean, there's nothing wrong with signing a big check and giving it to the Cancer Institute. I'm not saying it, but we did that also, as you know. And, but in very many places, Stephen, I mean, has got 2 public activities, and he has a number of others that is being done. So we act it as a family. We don't have an infrastructure for that. We do it ourselves. We make sometimes spontaneous decisions. We make sometimes decisions, very considered decisions. I mean, you asked me how much we have contributed to this.
I just wanted to be cheeky, that's all.
That's okay, David, you know, we know each other well enough. You know, we are only talking here in your lounge room and nobody is listening, you know. So why not, you know?
I'm sure they're listening to you, they're not listening to me.
In effect, it's quite a large sum. That hasn't been published before, but having regard for you taking the trouble of asking me here, I think I want to probably give you at least some reward for all what you do. I know you told me you were nervous. I'm not nervous.
You don't look nervous.
No, I'm not, you know. I considered this question very seriously, that you might ask me to do it. I've consulted with David, and in fact, in the last 10 years, the Lowy family has given away $350 million. So, I mean,
So how do we get people to do the same?
well, I mean, you asked me that question many times. We wanted to. When I say I, it's always we, or vice versa. We wanted to do many things, like you asked me for the cancer research contribution. And I would have been quite happy to do that just anonymously, but you said, we need your name, because other people will see it either as an example, or they may want to aspire to be something like you. And the same thing happened at the Lowy Institute. I very much wanted to get the Institute up and running, but I was persuaded otherwise, that you need a brand for that. Because there are quite a few of these think tanks, and they're just a think tank. Well, I'd like to think that the Lowy think tank is a bit different. You know, I'm told it's different, and I'm very proud of that. And I in retrospect, I think I'm pleased that I've given my name to that institution.
Thank you. Frank, the next bit, you talked about communal giving of time. I've had to get a bit of help on this, because one of the biggest things you've done, apart from running companies and running institutes and, you know, being a trendsetter and so on, is in relation to football. And as you know, I'm not really up on football, but I'd like to give you a few questions, and others may have more. Firstly, what got you into football? I mean, you had a humble origin. Where was the football in all of this?
Well, you can go back to Philanthropy. When I was a boy of 5, my father took me to a football game in the little town, which the community supported. And I got bitten hard. So since then, wherever I was, and I was in a few places, of course, I was born in Czechoslovakia, then it became Hungary, and I went to school. The few times I went to school in Budapest for a couple of years, and there I supported the team. From there, I went to Palestine and Israel. There I supported the team. When I came to Australia, it was wonderful to find a club called Hakoah, which in fact was a Jewish club, which was also a football club, which, of course, being football and Jewish both kind of appealed to me very much. Of course, it's no longer in existence. Fortunately, in a way not, because the game was suffering from the ethnic influence. Not multicultural, but ethnic. And in the early 50s and even early 60s, every week there was a World War III between the Hungarians and the Serbs and the Greeks and the Jews and the this and that. So why would any respectable Australian go to a game like that? You know, they take their families, but they don't want to go to World War III each time. So I had that ambition at the time to change that perception, because football is a wonderful game. It's a world game. It's played everywhere in most places, but it didn't get off ground here in Australia. I wanted it then, it was a long time ago, to make it a mainstream game. And no matter what I tried, it wouldn't succeed. So I also have a habit of not hitting my head in a brick wall, because the brick wall is a lot harder than my head, and I don't want to break it. So I gave it away, because I just couldn't change this ethnic religion, so to speak. And that's how these ethnics have expressed their frustration every week, and they brought their wars and their animosity from Europe. And Australia is not a place for that, so I got fed up and gave it away. And I was out of the game for about 15, maybe 18, 20 years, until I got a call from the Prime Minister. They were in terrible trouble. And I took the opportunity after a lot of thinking, because I thought maybe I can make a major contribution to the sporting scene to Australia. My head said no, but my heart said yes. So I followed my heart. I usually do, actually. Often they are in sync, but not every time. So I took the job on, and I'm very pleased to say that, of course, they had a constitution. I learned that from you, by the way. I had a constitution. I tore everything up into little shreds and called it Open a New Page, because I was given the authority. Until I wouldn't do it. And of course, in that one sweep, I wiped away the ethnic issue and brought in multiculturalism. If you watch the game and look at the names, they are all mixed names of Ich and Witch and Mitch, but the boys and or the girls are Australians. So I think I did that service, and I think I also very pleased to say that the game has progressed. And you can call it communal service in a way, but I think I enjoyed it. So we both win.
I think you did a great job. Yeah. Frank, I have to ask, was it naive to think you could win the World Cup? Well, that's a question that hasn't been exercising my mind at all, but everybody I bump into wants to know the question. Yeah.
It's not one of my proudest, or not really. It's not one of my proudest time, because you could, in retrospect, you could say that it was naive. But unfortunately, it was not a level playing field, which I didn't know at the time. But I found out to my bitter end that it was not a level playing field. In the main thing, those 5 or 6 countries that were bidding for that, it was America, Japan, Korea, Australia, and Japan. And beforehand, there was for the 18 and 22, and there were another 5 or 6 nations. But most of these nations' association, their football association, were bidding. But the prize is so big that sovereign states got involved. And they put the power of the sovereign state behind the exercise. So international politics came in, international commerce came in. Of course but of course it was not known at the time. What I'm telling you is kind of public. And and there was no chance. I mean, how could Australia Football Association compete with a sovereign state? I don't need to name them, everybody knows them. But how could it be possible? It wasn't known then, but now it's known. So was it naive? No, I don't think it was naive, but should have realized to know a bit better. Every time you fail, you can blame yourself, because if you are good at it, you win. If you fail, even though circumstances are uncontrollable, but you fail, So it's not it's one of the failures I put down. I've got many others which are not public, by the way. Some others are public, but this one is another one.
Well, that actually brings me to my penultimate question. So those who've got questions, I've just got 2 to go. Actually, I've got 400 here, but I'm aware that we only have an hour. My second last question is the question of legacy. Recently, Fred and I had Bill Gates here, and I asked him the question, is legacy important to him? And he said he believed everybody worried about their legacy. And when asked what was his legacy, he said it was not Microsoft. It was what the money and the power of Microsoft could do for the world. Does Frank Lowy worry about his legacy? And with all these things you've done, what do you want to be remembered for?
Well, there are 2 very important things in life. And I think I'm not a scholar of Talmud, but I think there it says that your most precious thing is your name. There's nothing more precious and more important than your name. So I'd like to think that when I'm gone, they will think well of me because I did the right things. And side by side goes that is my family. Because, as you know, I spoke about them, and they're very important to me. And all my life was, and I think the rest of my life will be the same. So I hope my family will follow many of the things that I've taught them, I learned from them, and how I worked with them. And I think if these two things will materialize, I think I will be very happy. If I will know that I'm happy, I don't know that part, but I mean, if those two things materialize, I think I will have thought of myself, I've done a good job.
Well, I'm pretty sure your name will remain very, very highly lauded. My last question, as everybody knows, I'm an inexperienced interviewer.
No, you're doing okay, David. Don't.
Well,
I know you're modest, but
But the question I've had greatest success with is to ask my subject,
yes.
if I had been a professional interviewer, what question should I have asked you that I didn't? And before you give the answer, just to give yourself time to think about it, when I asked that of Kate Blanchett, she said, "What's it like to be in bed with Brad Pitt?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "No, she's not going to tell me." So I'm hopeful I get a bit further with you.
Well, I mean, you are doing the interviewing. I don't really want to do your job. I hope I've done my bit here this evening. And of course, you and I have been working for a long period of time together, quite successfully. And what should I tell you? What to ask me is, well, maybe there is an intriguing question out there, which I will ask for you to ask me. It's when I'm going to retire.
Frank, when are you going to retire?
I have no idea.
Well, would people like to help me out? I mean, I have, as I said, 397 questions left, but if others have questions, I think it's only fair. We're very lucky we get Frank Lowy at our campus occasionally, but seldom does he allow himself to be asked questions. So this is your opportunity. There are roving mics. Do we have anyone who wants? There's a question over here.
I can't see, but...
Do you want to stand up?
Yes.
Mr.
My name's Clyde McConaughey. For the last few years, I've looked after a PAF, a low-profile PAF, valued nonetheless at about $100 million, and it's been focused on developmental aid, foreign developmental aid. There was a very strong push this year and in the last 12 months to restrict within Australia the In Australia test so that Australians could only give to charities and foundations which are only for the benefit of Australians. Given, in fact, both your gentlemen's backgrounds, I wonder what your views are, even though that's sort of come somewhat off the boil recently.
Well, I haven't heard that push for restricting Australians to give money outside. I mean, the Australian government does, so why aren't the citizens entitled to do that? I mean, it's just, kind of short answer, but that's what it is. I think that we should be entitled to support causes outside Australia. We do. I mean, my family supports charities and other things in Israel. We are conducting a medical research which uses overseas scientists, and we pay them. I don't think we could conduct that research without using the scientists from outside Australia. I mean, as you know, research is global. So I don't think it would be right to restrict Australians to give money for causes that they believe in, and they are outside Australia.
Other questions?
But they must be bored with me already, you know.
I thought they'd help me out. Well, it's the three behind you, but don't forget your question.
Hi, Frank. Richard Frudenstein. You're obviously personally very, very generous, and I'm sure Westfield is as well. How do you think about corporate giving as opposed to individual giving and the responsibility to shareholders?
Well, that's again another vexed question. I think people who have money should give. So if a corporate decides to give, it gives it on behalf of itself probably, and on behalf of its shareholders. There is such a thing as corporate citizenship, which has obligations to contribute. And I think it should. Any entity, whether individual, family, corporation, that has money, makes money out of the community, which of course all of us do, it ought to give something back. So I think it's appropriate, provided it's not done for the glory of the people who give it, but for the company who gives it.
There's another question. Just down.
Hello, Peter Shorthouse of UBS. You talked about the focus of your giving partly being catalysed by your mother and also by some hobbies and David's hobbies, etc. How do you decide where else you give? Is it always a personal catalyst, or did you ever sit down and plan and say, we've got to come up with some focus areas and this is how we've done it?
Well, I think that how do we come about? I mean, I think I said it before, I'm not sure whether, some of it we do spontaneously, and some of it we do because we believe in the person that asks. And that is very pointed, because the people that give ought to be encouraged to give. People that work ought to be encouraged to work. And when you give to an organization, often you ought to find both. But the people who work for the various philanthropists ought to be rewarded for what they do. So there are times when we decide to do it in the first instance, because the person ought to be rewarded for what he tries to do. But of course, it must represent a worthwhile philanthropic cause. But I just want to emphasize again that how important it is for us, the workers that do the work, because without that is no philanthropy. You know, I mean, if nobody would have asked me for the cancer research to give that whatever the sum was, that sum would not have been given. But in that case was David, and David was very pleased that his effort has been rewarded.
No doubt about that.
No, yeah. No, but I'm just making an example of that.
Absolutely.
And both are very important, the person and the cause. And of course, it's our decision, but it's our money. So it's our decision. As I said before, I think we don't have an infrastructure. We do it by ourselves. Because there's another aspect which I didn't say. It's a great pleasure to give. Really, we are very happy when we can make a proper donation, because, as the saying goes, it's a lot better to give than to receive.
I think we've got time for two more questions. Luca? I think it's Luca back there.
We're here now.
Mr. Lowy, Luca Bill-Jordan-Edis. Two questions. One, do you have a metric in terms of philanthropy? In other words, how much...
Metric to what? I'm sorry?
A metric. In other words...
Percentage of what?
A percentage if you like, of whatever income
Of your earnings or...
No, not really.
or assets. No.
Not really. I mean, the metric is... Actually, we don't have a metric.
That's right. And the other question is, I suppose you've possibly answered it, but I just wanted a bit of clarity. You talked about, I mean, you hear some contradictions sometimes about anonymity and being seen to be giving, and then you talk about, of course, one of the most important things being one's name. It's difficult to get your name up in lights if you're giving anonymously. So how much strength do you give to the question of anonymity?
Well, I mean, I think. So I don't really know whether I have a clear-cut answer to that. But you do give anonymously, for sure, when it's a personal assistance, for the people to keep their pride, that they are not beholden to you forever, that they are not beggars, and to keep their pride. That type of giving ought to be anonymous. But there is a question of how you feel about it. You know, you want to be associated with a good cause. I think I'd be lying if I would say no. And you make these judgments, and sometimes when you give, it's very important that you give your name, like we discussed it before. So I don't think it's hard and fast rule. The fact is your money going to do good? If it's good, no difference how you give it. Just make sure it's a good cause.
Last question. Who'd like to be the lucky last? I don't know whether the Vice-Chancellor will kill me if he doesn't get his question.
He will get last. I'll answer him anyway, whether you ask it or not.
We'll allow him a special cause.
Elizabeth Tan. We've just set up a PAF.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Just set up a charitable foundation.
Yeah, we've just set up a PAF in honour of our parents who came, who started with nothing and built up. And we were just wondering how to get our children to be interested in participating in this PAF. Yes. Because at the moment, we still can't do that.
Well, on that subject, I have some very definite thoughts. It's not what you tell the children, it's how they will act on what you do. What example do you give them? In most cases, will pay benefit. I'm very lucky that my family fully supports me and follows me in this activity and quite a few others. So really the best way to ensure that that the children will follow is by example. Of course, we are parents. I think all of us or most of us are here. Parents are not perfect people either. So you can't always give a good example. But when you give good example over a long period of time, I think it will sink in most cases. And on mentioning that it's in your that foundation is in the honor of your parents, I think that's another reason why it's good to put a name to it, because you're honoring your parents by making a contribution. We didn't talk about that before, but that's a very important part of philanthropy. I think to honor the people, and I have given donations in honor of people for their birthday to various institutions, because I could have bought him anything, but it wouldn't meant much to him. But I gave it several times to an institution, an art institution or research institution, in honor of this person's birthday. Well, so that there can be, but as I said in the beginning, that the philanthropy that you do should be good. The others are subsidiary issues.
Thank you, Frank. Frank, I rent this room when I use it as my lounge room from the Vice-Chancellor, so we'll just give him a quick chance. Can we just have a microphone? right in the front row?
Yes,
No,
okay.
well,
Now here it
it's
is.
here.
Thanks. No, my question, which the Chancellor, who I always try to make happy, said you should have a question in case no one else does. So you don't need this question because you've had a surplus of questions. But you said it's good to give. What are the circumstances when you've given and after the event you haven't felt good? And what are the circumstances when after the event you felt really good, better than you thought you'd feel? I mean, from your point of view as a donor, when have you been pleased you've been a donor and when have you been less pleased?
I have to think hard to think about when I was pleased, when I wasn't pleased that I gave. I really can't think of an example that particularly a philanthropic cause, occasionally you stray a little, you're not perfect. But I don't really remember that I was sorry that I helped somebody.
And the other side, when were you most pleased?
I think when the endeavor is very successful as a result of my communal service bit and as a result of the money I have been able to give. I mean, example, I'm very pleased with the Lowy Institute. It does a lot for me. So in a way, I'm not sure whether who is better off, really the recipient or the giver. I think when you feel that the giver is very well served, I think the cause would have been very worthwhile.
Frank, I think there's one very significant thing, which I'm sure everybody's picked up. We've been sitting here for the last hour. I haven't even whispered the word Westfield. And I think that's an enormous compliment to you. All the things that you've done, all the things that we talk about, whether it be philanthropy, that thing called football, all the institutes, and your understanding, I think, of the three real parts of the geography that you're very interested in. So I think on behalf of everybody, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for putting up with somebody who's got a clipboard and not much else. And thank you.
Thank you.